SKOL Vikings, let's win this game.
Vikings fans, let me be straight with you. These last few days have been wild. A veteran went down and suddenly might open the door to challenge our young quarterback. A legend of the position praised what he did against Washington. A fired-up offensive star came so close to causing a sideline scene. There's also a grounded breakdown of that perfect game. And at the end of everything, a conversation that hits everyone who lives and breathes Vikings football and wears purple and gold while thinking about 2025 and what could have been. Now, before we dive into all these storylines, let me ask you for something. Hit that subscribe button. It is free, and it helps this purple and gold project grow like crazy. Drop a like because YouTube pushes the video to more Vikings fans when you do. And jump into the comments to share your take with the rest of the fan base. Let me walk you through how I see this whole Daniel Jones situation, because out of nowhere he becomes a real possibility to push J.J. McCarthy. It felt like a long shot. Minnesota had no cap space and zero room for a big investment. And honestly, nobody imagined a top-tier free agent would slip after such a wild turn of events. But then came that brutal injury on the other side of the conference, and suddenly everything shifted into a strange, uncomfortable scenario. Still, it opened cracks in the wall that this purple and gold fan base knows all too well. Jones was viewed as a premium piece. He was playing high-level football, leading a competitive Indianapolis Colts team, and trending toward a massive deal. Then the injury flipped the entire board. A rupture like that kills explosiveness, kills lower body strength, kills confidence. And worse, it crushes market value right when teams start building their off-season plans. Suddenly, the franchise is ready to go all in on him, have to rethink everything. And that opens a door where there was once only a brick wall. Here in Minnesota, there is another key detail. The plan has always been to give J.J. McCarthy breathing room in his third year. He needs it. He has little experience as a full-time starter. He rides highs and lows. He still feels the mental blows of the NFL. But the team cannot go into a full season relying only on hope. They need someone who brings real competition, someone who makes the kid look sideways and think, I need to deliver. And to be honest with you, that kind of healthy pressure changes careers. Now hold on, there is no guarantee Daniel Jones would arrive as early as March. He will need to prove he is fully recovered, that his body responds, that his mechanics are not stuck. An injury like this usually takes more than a year for a player to return from. And Minnesota is not going to rush anything. The team likes McCarthy. They also like the undrafted rookie who is developing slowly, and they still need to address other roster holes before jumping into even a cheap contract. But the irony is impossible to ignore. The team once let Jones walk, believing they were heading in a new direction. Now, fate puts both men back in the same hallway, almost brushing shoulders. It could be just a casual July conversation. It could turn into a short, objective deal. Or it could be nothing at all, but the possibility is real. And only here do you get this kind of perspective from someone who lives the day-to-day grind of Vikings football, feeling every twist of this saga. If McCarthy lights it up in the final stretch, everything changes. If he struggles, the conversation heats up. I am torn. Part of me wants to protect the kid. Another part thinks a motivated Daniel Jones coming off an injury might be exactly the spark he needs. Tell me what you think, because this storyline splits the fan base right down the middle. And the wildest part is that this story is just getting started. The next one shows how a giant of the sport saw our quarterback's growth in his latest outing. Let me tell you what hit me after that 31-0 win. It was not the blowout itself, it was watching a guy who understands the position better than almost anyone, a living legend, look at J.J. McCarthy and say, that was the real thing. When someone like Drew Brees praises the efficiency, the reads, and the command of such a young quarterback, you stop, you breathe, you listen, because he has been exactly where our kid is trying to go. What Minnesota did against Washington was almost surgical. Simple calls, a lighter offense, a run game that finally helped, a more stable offensive line, and then McCarthy delivered. 3 touchdown passes, 0 turnovers, a high completion rate, and for the first time, an entire game without handing the ball away. It sounds basic, I know, but for a quarterback who had been taking hits, physically and mentally, this was huge. And to be honest with you, a performance like this changes conversations inside an NFL building. Brees pointed out exactly that. The offense rediscovering its identity, the confidence returning, the team leaning on what works instead of trying to force something new. He talked about how well the run game rolled, how the play action clicked, how the quarterback distributed the ball, and he spotlighted something fans feel in their bones. If the defense plays at that level and forces turnovers, the offense suddenly has a much easier life. Even I could run a few snaps like that. But here is the uncomfortable part. The team sits at 5 wins and 8 losses. The standings do not care about one great game. The playoff path is almost gone. So what is the real focus now? It is using these final games to turn potential into proof. It is figuring out if this Washington outing was a one-off or the beginning of something real. Anyone who lives and breathes Vikings football knows that one good Sunday does not build a franchise. Breeze even mentioned the spoiler role. Facing Dallas. Facing Detroit again, matching up with high-powered offenses. If Minnesota is not going far in January, at least use this stretch to cause problems for contenders and to cement the guy who could lead the next competitive window. It is frustrating to see this version show up only now, but it is the hand we have. These last games also shape how the staff thinks heading into 2026. If McCarthy stacks good performances, he enters the year as the clear QB1. If he slides backward, the talk about adding a veteran gets louder. It is harsh. But that is the NFL. At the end of the day, the veteran's praise is not a golden stamp. It is a push. It boosts confidence, moves the locker room, and makes everyone who lives and breathes Vikings football think, maybe we really do have something here. Now he needs to prove it on the road in prime time, against a defense that will not be nearly as nice. And that leads straight into the next story, because one offensive star refuses to take a back seat. Let me tell you something. That moment with Jefferson hit me hard. On one side, you have one of the best receivers in the league frustrated beyond belief. He hides his helmet and tries to sneak back onto the field in a game that was already in the bag. On the other side, you see coaches, staff members, and even security stepping in to hold him back. That does not happen everywhere, but he is not just any player. He is the face of the franchise, the guy who carries Defend the North on his cleats every Sunday. Kevin O'Connell made it clear after the game. The goal was to protect the roster. The scoreboard was done. The offense was humming. The young quarterback needed controlled reps. So the coach said, "That's enough. We're pulling starters." Try explaining that to Jefferson. He had been stuck in a rough stretch, no touchdown since week 9, numbers far below his standard. Suddenly, the offense explodes and he is barely part of the celebration. Of course, his blood was boiling. And to be honest with you, I would much rather deal with this kind of problem than with a star who checks out emotionally. He wants to play. He wants to contribute. He wants to score. He is irritated by 11 yards in a 31-0 blowout. That is the mentality of a real superstar. But there is a line. When security has to step in and he tries to dodge coaches to get back in, the situation gets complicated. O'Connell handled it with a calm tone, talked about leadership, talked about Jefferson smiling in the locker room, reinforced that all he wants to do is win. And honestly, you can see that on the field. Even with double coverage and entire defenses selling out to stop him, he still draws attention nonstop. He opens space for teammates and pulls defenders out of alignment on key third downs. The raw production dipped, but his gravitational pull is still massive. The real issue is the offensive structure. The game plan was simplified to help McCarthy. Quicker reads, shorter throws, a lot of checkdowns. In that setup, Jefferson becomes a luxury decoy far too often, and that hits him emotionally. He sees the scoreboard at 31-0. He sees teammates scoring, the stadium roaring, and he feels like he left something on the table. That turns into fuel for next week. In Dallas, the offense cannot be this conservative. That defense gives up points, but also pressures quarterbacks, forces mistakes, and flips games instantly. Minnesota might need a controlled shootout, more aggressive throws, more trust in the kid's arm, more targets for number 18. And I really want to know how you balance protecting your star versus unleashing him, because this debate splits both the fan base and the locker room. What this episode shows, above anything else, is Jefferson's competitive fire and how the locker room still revolves around his talent. Now in the next section, we shift to a colder, more analytical look at McCarthy's perfect game and what actually hides beneath the surface. Look, that Washington game was the kind of performance that gets you excited and cautious at the same time. Excited because the offensive plan finally made sense. Cautious because we all know exactly what kind of defense was on the other side. Anyone who lives and breathes Vikings football has felt the sting of false hope after an easy matchup. McCarthy did exactly what the staff asked of him. Quick throws, short reads, no hero ball. His average depth of target dropped. His time to throw sped up. The offense established rhythm. You could literally watch him go from his first read to his second and deliver with calm. And there were bright spots beyond the basics. That touchdown to Josh Oliver showed confidence working the middle. Those sideline shots to Addison showed why the kid is so important for stretching the field. And most importantly, there were 0 reckless passes into triple coverage. To be honest with you, After what we saw in recent weeks, removing the desperate throws alone changes the entire energy of the offense. But context matters. Washington's secondary is one of the worst in the league. They sat in soft zone almost the entire time. The pass rush barely arrived. Their offense never forced Minnesota into stressful must-throw situations. Playing loose with a lead is nothing like needing a comeback in enemy territory. Purple Faithful knows the real measuring stick comes when things get messy. There was also that one play that showed exactly where McCarthy still needs to grow. The design was perfect. Jefferson working deep, the defense biting on the underneath route. Number 18 breaking wide open. The pocket was messy, but still workable. He had room to plant and fire. Instead, he bailed and scrambled. He picked up yards, sure, but that could have been a career highlight throw. That balance between protecting the ball and taking calculated risks is part of the journey. Early on, you prove you can run the system without turning the ball over. Later, you prove you can hit tight windows. The staff knows this, and honestly, this game felt more like this version works than we found our long-term franchise guy. For Vikings fans everywhere, the feeling is mixed. Relief after finally seeing a clean performance. Hope that this is something to build on. Fear that it is just another outlier in a chaotic season. That 31-0 win matters. But whether it becomes meaningful depends entirely on what he does next. And that connects perfectly to our final topic, because when you combine this quarterback performance with the defense's response and the way the entire roster executed, it paints a picture of what if that hangs over the entire season. Let me be honest, that 31-0 win in Washington felt like pride and frustration at the same time. Pride because the Vikings finally looked like the version everyone imagined back in August. Frustration because it exposes how many opportunities slipped away earlier. Anyone who watched the losses to Atlanta, Philadelphia, Baltimore, Chicago, and that drop-off in Dublin knows exactly how many what-ifs piled up. This time, everything clicked. The run game punished Washington with Aaron Jones and Jordan Mason. The offensive line was finally intact. Protection held up. Long drives killed the clock. The young quarterback stayed efficient, protected the ball, and kept converting crucial third downs. The Brian Flores defense brought pressure, stole possessions, and flipped the field. Special teams helped instead of hurting. Simple formula, but for anyone who has lived this roller coaster all season, it felt surreal. Van Ginkel looked like his old self making impact plays. Jonathan Greenard created disruption. Harrison Smith played like he turned the clock back years. Few penalties, strong time of possession control. Third downs winning on both sides of the ball. You watch that version and think, if this had shown up even in half the games, we would be talking about a division race instead of playoff math that barely exists. And to be honest with you, that is the part that really hurts as a fan. At the same time, the game becomes a blueprint, and for once, not in the cliche way. The formula is crystal clear, a physical run game. McCarthy focusing on decisions and accuracy rather than highlights. Jefferson used as a true focal point, not just as gravity, a disciplined, aggressive defense. Add key role players like C.J. Ham and Josh Oliver, plus a healthy center, and the team transforms. Meanwhile, the rest of the league keeps getting wild. Green Bay climbing the division. Chicago closing in. Detroit pushing hard. Once again, nobody giving Minnesota real respect outside its own building. Over in the AFC, total chaos. Contenders stumbling and surprise teams heating up. All of that reinforces the feeling that this Vikings season was more wasted than weak. Because when healthy and executing, this roster is nowhere near bad. For the Purple Faithful, the mission now is simple. Hope this game is not just a pretty outlier. Dallas, the Giants, the Lions, and the Packers will dictate a lot. They shape quarterback development, roster decisions, and locker room momentum. And only here do we merge performance, schedule context, division temperature, and behind-the-scenes perspective into the kind of read you get from lifelong fans in the stands. That 31-0 win would already feel satisfying on its own. Coming after such a chaotic season, it feels like a statement. If they sustain it, the future looks different. And that brings us into the emotional final stretch, tying together everything this season left hanging. It is crazy how one Sunday can reveal so much about this team. We saw the possibility of a veteran returning to the quarterback room. We heard a legend of the position stamp our young guys' potential. We watched a star receiver burn with competitive fire. And we finally saw an offensive blueprint that actually works. To me, the 2025 Vikings are not a failure. They are a warning shot. Proof that if they get it right, this roster can scare anybody. And before you go, drop a comment. This space belongs to everyone who lives and breathes Vikings football. Stay tuned. SKOL Vikings. Let's go.